In the world of combat sports, respect and sportsmanship are often held in high regard, with fighters commonly showing appreciation for their opponents and the sport itself after a hard-fought victory. However, there have been instances where emotions run high and fighters have displayed behavior that deviates from these norms. These moments, though controversial, provide insights into the intense competitive spirit that drives athletes in combat sports. Here, we explore a few notable instances where fighters showed little to no respect after securing a win, sparking debate and reflection within the fighting community. Anyone who has never participated in MMA competition cannot possibly comprehend the feelings that accompany a victory, yet on occasion, those feelings bring out the worst in these competitors. In order to ensure that you don't miss anything, as always, please let us know if you appreciate the video by clicking the like and subscribing buttons. Now, without further ado and in no particular sequence, these are the boxers who, following a victory, showed no respect. Shia Aoki versus Mizuto Hirota. Shia Aoki doesn't just submit his opponents. He's going to sleep. He's going to sleep. This infamous Japanese fighting legend can also be counted on to spring up some wild post-fight antics. And when he took on Mizuto Hirota, some past words caused there to be something of a feud bubbling under the surface. But when Aoki managed to snap Hirota's arm with a kimura, it still wasn't enough. Fans were left shocked when he decided to rub it in even further, smiling while waving his middle finger in his opponent's face as he was lying there on the floor with his arms snapped. This is just another level of cold and moment that would follow him for many years afterwards. There's no denying that he is one of the most celebrated figures in Japanese MMA, but you just can't excuse this type of behavior. Enzo Gracie versus Ben Spikers. To kick things off, we have the truly abysmal finishing sequence which saw Enzo Gracie score a submission over the judoka Ben Spikers. But his victory was far from the most relevant part of the story. The two had some real beef after their initial meeting at the press conference. But when Gracie refused to let go of the submission, it was clear that he was taking things way too far. He then lashed out and tried to kick Spikers when the referee pulled him off. And then, to make matters worse, as he walked away, Enzo intentionally stood on Spikers' head. He later apologized for his actions. The damage was already done. Gracie went on to have a great reputation within the fighting world, but this remains one of the darker moments on his otherwise stellar resume as a fighter and later as a coach. Katlyn Nurmagomedov versus Conor McGregor. Okay, look, we know. Conor McGregor has done more than his fair share to really make an enemy of Katlyn Nurmagomedov. But regardless of who started the feud or who crossed the line the furthest, Katlyn definitely lost the run of himself after submitting McGregor at UFC 229. With more eyes on this UFC event than any other in history, Katlyn decided that causing Conor to tap just wasn't enough for him, and that his team deserved punishment too. And after getting into a shouting match with Dylan Danis, Conor's training partner, Katlyn caused a full-on brawl by vaulting over the side of the octagon to attack him. Before anyone knew what was going on, the chaos had spilled into the cage as well, with Conor coming under fire from Katlyn's teammates. This was a moment that has no equal in the sport, one of the wildest nights the UFC has ever known. Michael Venom Page versus Evangelista Cyborg Santos. Look, there's every reason to believe that Michael Venom Page didn't realize just how severe of an injury he had caused to his opponent, Evangelista Cyborg Santos, when he decided to throw a Pokeball at him. But either way, damaging your opponent's skull so badly that it causes the end of their fighting career is one hell of a way to win. This is probably the most gruesome flying knee ever landed in mixed martial arts, and the whole thing was just capped off on a real sour note because of MVP's celebration. Good for a viral moment, sure, but a pretty awful way to end someone's time as a fighter. Santos, of course, never fought again. And while MVP has indeed moved to become a very good member of the welterweight top 10 in Bellator, he certainly lost a few fans with this one. Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir. You can't make a list of the all-time great UFC post-fight interviews without mentioning Brock Lesnar and his famed horseshoe dig at Frank Mir. After succumbing to an early submission in fight number 1, Lesnar was more experienced and far more comfortable in an MMA cage when they fought for a second time. And after putting Mir out to defend his title, Brock took to the microphone to tell the fans all about Frank's horseshoe and what he did with it. He then proceeded to tell the world exactly what he was thinking about doing later that night, which of course had nothing to do with Frank Mir, but we decided to add it anyway. Georgi Masvidal's Ben Askren. If you talk enough trash to a fighter like Georgi Masvidal, there's a very good chance that you'll awaken something truly savage within him. At least that was the case back in 2019 when Ben Askren put his unbeaten record on the line for a highly publicized welterweight showdown against Gamebred. So what did Georgi do? Well, he certainly let his fighting do the talking, and it took him just 5 short seconds to finish Ben Askren with a flying knee. But even with the fastest UFC finish of all time under his belt, George was not fully satisfied. Instead, he decided to rub it in by taunting the clearly unconscious fighter some more, before then flopping to the mat in one final brutal display of mockery. Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. Israel Adesanya knows how to create a real-life me moment, and after Paulo Costa talked a boatload of trash ahead of their middleweight title fight, he decided to offer up a little payback after scoring a second-round TKO. Now, look, we're not saying that these two had to make up post-fight, but as Paulo Costa laid there totally dazed after a tough defeat, Izzy definitely did his best to embarrass him. And yeah, it wasn't the best look for the sport, especially for a champion. It was clear that these two just didn't like each other. But did it really have to result in a display of behavior like that? Maybe, maybe not. We'll let you guys be the judge of that. Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier. Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier were two polar opposites that were always going to clash to some degree. But the sheer hatred these two guys built up for one another over the years was truly a wild thing to experience. Jones seemed to have a sixth sense when it came to getting inside his competitive rival's head. And in the final seconds of their first fight at UFC 182, with the win comfortably in the bag, Jones decided to add insult to injury, celebrating before the bell had even sounded. So when DC then dropped his hands in acceptance of the fight being over, Jon immediately switched back into gear, landing a pair of sneaky punches. It was a bit of an ugly tactic, but to be fair, it was also entirely within the rule set. Then to take it one step further, Jones taunted Cormier with no shred of remorse, keeping this feud as heated as ever up until their eventual rematch. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. His son, another appearance from the middleweight champion, comes in next, a recent entry from UFC 287. Sure, we've certainly seen the follow-up video that showcases the two embracing backstage, but after the last stylebender managed to score a massive knockout over his great rival, he decided to celebrate the moment by using Alex's famous bow and arrow motion against him. But that's not what gets him this spot on this list. The real kicker came when Israel walked over to where Pereira's son and wife were sitting and proceeded to taunt the small child, remembering that Pereira Jr. did the same thing 5 years ago when his father scored that vicious KO. Yeah, you heard that right. Adesanya waited 5 years to get one back over both his fighting rival Pereira and also his very young son. While respect and sportsmanship are foundational in combat sports, instances where fighters show no respect after a win serve as reminders of the raw emotions and high stakes involved in these intense competitions. As fans and participants alike, we continue to witness a spectrum of behaviors that reflect the complexity of human nature under pressure. Ultimately, these moments challenge us to appreciate the balance between fierce competition and mutual respect, shaping the ongoing discourse within the dynamic world of combat sports.